Beverly Hills sunlight filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows, catching dust particles that danced above imported marble floors. The showroom buzzed with the particular tension that comes when wealth meets spectacle. 42 clients holding champagne flutes while their phones captured everything. Dominic Carter stood beside a Ferrari 488 GTB work uniform, still carrying traces of cleaning solution car keys pressed between his calloused fingers like evidence of something impossible. Evelyn Hartford's voice cut through the murmur, each word measured with the precision of old money that never needed to shout. The woman wore $70,000 in understated elegance, her silver hair caught in afternoon light as she addressed the CEO now trapped at the center of her own showroom. Mrs. Blackwood made a promise, on video, in front of 40 witnesses. The phones kept recording. Someone's champagne glass trembled liquid threatening to spill. "The Ferrari is yours if you can fix it." Those were your exact words, Diana. Catherine Pierce stepped forward, late 50s, settling into the kind of confidence that comes from 3 decades of being right about machines. Her credentials hung invisible but heavy in the air between them. "I've verified Mr. Carter's diagnostic work. 28 years consulting for Ferrari North America, and this is the most impressive repair methodology I've encountered." Diana Blackwood stood frozen, her carefully constructed superiority crumbling, like the aluminum bracket that had started everything. Her face had gone the particular shade of white that accompanies the realization that escape routes have all closed simultaneously. The crowd pressed closer. Cameras zoomed. Somewhere in the back, a client whispered to another, spreading the story in real-time ripples. Diana's lips moved the microphone on someone's phone, catching words meant to be private. "The car is yours." The eruption came instantly. Applause gasped, strangers grabbing each other's arms as if witnessing history rather than commerce. Phones waved overhead like digital torches, capturing the moment a cleaning man received keys to $340,000 of Italian engineering. Dominic's voice cut through his own memory, the internal narration that had sustained him through 6 months of calculated invisibility. 3 months ago, he'd been a ghost. Not dead, but functionally absent from the vision of people whose eyes skated over work uniforms like they skated over wallpaper. His grandmother Eleanor had taught him something that echoed, now her voice reaching across 23 years of silence since cancer took her too early. "Machines don't lie, baby. People do." The truth had a way of surfacing, eventually rising like oil through water, no matter how many layers tried to suppress it. The screen went black. September 2024, 3 months before the resolution. September morning in Inglewood arrived with a particular quality of light that promised heat, later the kind of California dawn that felt temporary before the real day began. Dominic Carter moved through his apartment with the economy of motion that comes from managing tight spaces, measuring coffee grounds, while his daughter struggled with her school uniform in the bedroom they shared. Zoe emerged with one sock on the other clutched in her fist like a weapon she hadn't decided whether to deploy. 8 years old, gap-toothed smile, currently absent her hair, pulled into 2 careful puffs that had taken 15 minutes to perfect the night before. "Daddy, did you check my volcano calculations?" Ms. Rodriguez said the baking soda ratio has to be exact or the whole science fair project fails. Dominic set the coffee pot down, turning to the kitchen table where her poster board sprawled across bills that couldn't be paid yet. "How engines work," written in careful bubble letters across the top diagrams she'd copied from library books, because internet was a luxury that came and went with paycheck timing. "Already checked, baby. Your math is perfect." Pride colored his voice despite the past due notice visible beneath her careful drawings. $780 for an apartment that leaked when it rained, bank statement showing $58.27, until Friday's direct deposit brought another $312 before taxes. The photo on the wall showed 3 people back when there had been 3. Lisa's smile bright enough to hurt Dominic younger by 4 years, and a universe of grief, baby Zoe small enough to fit in the crook of one arm. Breast cancer had taken Lisa in 2020 before Zoe could form memories of her mother's laugh or the way she'd sung off key while cooking. 4 years felt simultaneously like yesterday and a lifetime ago. "When's the science fair?" Zoe's question carried weight beyond its simplicity, testing him the way children test promises they've learned might break. "Next Saturday? I'll be there." She pulled on the second sock, not looking at him. "Even if you have to work," Dominic crossed the small kitchen, kneeling until they were eye level. Her gaze met his, searching for the truth that children can sense before adults admit it. "Baby, nothing is bigger than you. Not work, not bills, not anything in this world. You're my whole sky." The phrase settled between them, familiar and weighted. Zoe's shoulders relaxed incrementally, though her eyes still held the skepticism of a child who'd learned that adults meant well but couldn't always deliver. You said that last month about my birthday. The accusation landed soft but accurate. He'd missed 2 hours of her 8th birthday because Diana Blackwood had demanded the showroom be detailed twice before a client visit. The memory tasted like failure. And I was there for the important part. Cake candles, you blowing them out. Remember. Zoe nodded, conceding the point without quite forgiving it. Next Saturday, science fair, front row, I promise, on Grandma Ellie's memory. That sealed it. Invoking Eleanor Carter's name carried weight in their household, the dead grandmother who'd raised Dominic holding more authority than most living relatives managed. Zoe's smile returned gap-toothed and genuine. Dominic's mind drifted back 23 years while his hands poured cereal muscle memory, handling breakfast, while consciousness traveled to Oakland parking lots and lessons that had shaped everything. Eleanor Carter at 62, janitor uniform permanently creased from industrial washing machines, eyes sharp, despite the exhaustion that came from working 2 jobs to keep a 14-year-old grandson fed. Dominic remembered lying under a Honda Civic with grease staining his hands, the concrete cold against his back, while his grandmother's voice guided him through automotive mysteries. "What do you hear, baby?" The question had seemed simple. Dominic closed his eyes, focusing past the ambient noise of the apartment complex, past traffic on the nearby street, down into the mechanical language that most people never learned to speak. Clicking. Fast, regular, like a heartbeat, but metal. Eleanor's approval had been wordless, a hand on his shoulder, communicating pride more clearly than sentences. Good, now find it. Machines don't lie, baby. They tell you exactly what's wrong if you're willing to listen instead of assuming. 2 hours of tracing sounds with his hands feeling for vibrations, pressing his ear against different components until he found it. A heat shield bracket loose and rattling metal fatigue, causing it to vibrate against the exhaust pipe whenever the engine ran. $20 to replace. 3 mechanics with diagnostic computers and formal training had declared the transmission dying, quoting $1,200 for a rebuild the car didn't need. Eleanor had laughed that particular sound that combined vindication with sorrow at how thoroughly the world missed obvious truths. People trust computers more than common sense. Trust credentials more than competence. Remember that, Dominic. When you're older, when you've got your own gifts, remember that being right means nothing if nobody's listening. Cancer had come 3 years later, aggressive and merciless. 17-year-old Dominic had watched his grandmother fade in a hospital room. They couldn't afford medical bills accumulating faster than minimum wage paychecks could address. She'd held his hand near the end, strength diminished, but purpose crystalline. Never let them tell you what you can't be, Dominic. Your gift is real. Promise me you'll use it. The promise had been easy to make, harder to keep across 20 years of shops that wouldn't hire someone without ASE certification, dealerships that required formal training, garages that looked at his skin color and found reasons why the position had just been filled. Zoe's voice pulled him back to the present. Daddy, you're staring at nothing again. Dominic blinked, refocusing on breakfast and the daughter who needed him present rather than lost in memories. Sorry, baby, just thinking. About Grandma Ellie. The perceptiveness of 8-year-olds never ceased to surprise him. Yeah, how'd you know? Zoe shrugged, spooning cereal with the practiced efficiency of someone running late. You get this look, like you're listening to something I can't hear. Maybe she understood more than he'd given her credit for. Maybe Eleanor's gift had skipped a generation, waiting to resurface in a gap-toothed 8-year-old who asked questions about baking soda ratios with the same intensity Dominic brought to harmonic frequencies. They finished breakfast in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from shared space and shared loss, 2 people who'd learned to be a family of 2 after being a family of 3. Blackwood Luxury Motors occupied premium real estate in Beverly Hills, the kind of address that announced wealth before customers even glimpsed the inventory. Dominic arrived at 6:30, 30 minutes before his official start time, using the service entrance that staff had been directed to use. Not explicitly, nothing documented, just the kind of unwritten rule that separated employees from clients in the geography of the building. The locker room smelled like industrial cleaner and old coffee, fluorescent lights humming overhead as Dominic opened his assigned storage cart. To casual observation, it held exactly what a details specialist needed. Microfiber cloths, various cleaning solutions, wax polish, organizational trays. Careful examination revealed something else entirely. The infrared thermometer rested in a modified spray bottle, housing professional-grade equipment capable of detecting temperature variations down to 1/10 of a degree. $800 new, purchased 18 months ago. with money that should have gone to rent. Dominic had slept in his car for 2 weeks, parking in different lots each night to avoid security showering at a gym membership he'd maintained specifically for that purpose. The digital stethoscope lay wrapped in a shop rag acoustic pickup sophisticated enough to detect vibrations beyond human hearing range. The vibration sensors disguised as tire pressure gauges, the oscilloscope application running on a tablet hidden beneath cleaning schedules and inventory checklists. $2,800 in diagnostic equipment assembled piece by piece over 2 years of sacrifice, representing the tools that shops required but wouldn't provide to someone without credentials. Nathan Grayson entered the locker room showroom manager and one of the few people at Blackwood Motors who treated Dominic like something other than mobile furniture. Mid-30s decent guy trapped in a system he hadn't built but benefited from anyway. Dom, you're here early. Always was. Punctuality was armor when you couldn't afford to give anyone reasons to criticize. Just getting set up. Nathan poured coffee from the ancient machine that produced something technically drinkable if standards remained flexible. Listen, about yesterday, Diana's comment about you using the service entrance. I didn't mean to. Dominic kept his voice level, empty of accusation. I know, Nathan, you're not her. Nathan's relief was visible, grateful to be absolved of responsibility for rules he enforced but hadn't created. She's getting worse. Clients are noticing. Mrs. Hartford asked me yesterday why our detail specialist couldn't use the front door like other employees. Evelyn Hartford. Dominic had observed her during client visits, the way she watched everything with eyes that missed nothing. Old money moving through the world with the confidence that came from never needing to prove anything secure enough in her position to notice things other wealthy clients ignored. What did you tell her? Nathan shifted uncomfortably. That it was company policy. She asked to see the written policy. I told her it wasn't formalized yet, because it doesn't exist in writing. Yeah. They both understood the game. Nothing documented, everything deniable discrimination wearing the mask of operational efficiency. Dominic had learned the patterns 6 months into his employment, started documenting them 6 months and 1 day later. Diana's desperate. If the Hartford order falls through, Nathan didn't need to finish. Everyone at Blackwood Motors understood the financial situation, whispered in break rooms, and evident in the way Diana's smile had grown increasingly brittle as months passed without major sales. Dominic nodded, offering nothing, revealing nothing. Nathan lingered another moment before heading to the showroom floor, leaving Dominic alone with equipment that represented both his gift and his secret. Saturday's showcase event transformed the showroom into theater, carefully staged abundance, designed to make wealth feel accessible to people who could afford inaccessible things. 42 clients circulated through exotic machinery, champagne and conversation flowing with the ease that comes from knowing everyone present could write six-figure checks without checking account balances first. Diana Blackwood worked the room with practiced grace, mid-40s, settling into the kind of elegant hardness that happened when beauty became a weapon rather than an accident. Her father had founded Blackwood Motors' old photographs showing a stern man who'd built success through determination and attitudes that hadn't aged well. Diana had inherited both the business and the worldview, maintaining traditions that should have died with him. Dominic cleaned a Lamborghini in the corner, functionally invisible to clients whose eyes registered his presence, the way they registered floor tiles or air conditioning vents. Evelyn Hartford sat in the front row of the presentation area, silver hair and quiet attention, making her simultaneously unremarkable and impossible to miss. Diana's presentation hit familiar notes: luxury lifestyle narratives and exclusive opportunities, the verbal equivalent of the champagne being served. At Blackwood Motors, we understand that excellence recognizes excellence. Our clients deserve absolute perfection, which is why we maintain the highest standards in every aspect of our operation. The words landed hollow against the reality of 5 failed Ferrari repairs and $8,000 wasted on specialists who couldn't solve what Dominic had diagnosed in 40 minutes. Diana's gaze found him, calculation visible in the pause before she spoke. Oh, and speaking of our commitment to service, Marcus, could you come here for a moment? The name landed wrong deliberately, a mistake too consistent to be accidental. Dominic had corrected it 4 times in 6 months. Each correction met with apologies that didn't prevent the next occurrence. It's Dominic, Mrs. Blackwood. Heads turned. Phones lifted slightly, not recording yet, but ready. Diana's smile sharpened. Of course, Dominic, my apologies. The apology carried the particular insincerity that made it worse than silence. Dominic set down his cleaning cloth, crossing the showroom, with awareness that 42 sets of eyes tracked his movement. His work uniform clean, but clearly budget tier, contrasted sharply with the designer clothes surrounding him. Diana held up Ferrari keys, the metal catching light, in a way that felt choreographed. This car has been stalling for 3 weeks. 5 certified specialists couldn't identify the problem. MIT graduates, Stanford engineers, technicians who trained in Italy, $8,000 in diagnostics and were no closer to a solution. She paused, letting the number sink in. But I had a thought. Maybe we need fresh eyes, unencumbered by formal education, natural instinct, street smarts. The coded language landed like rocks dropped into water, ripples of discomfort spreading through clients who recognized racism even when it wore polite phrasing. Evelyn Hartford's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her posture, attention sharpening. Diana dropped the keys at Dominic's feet. Metal hitting marble produced a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the sudden silence, keys skittering slightly before settling near his shoes. The Ferrari is yours if you can fix it. Go ahead, Dominic. Pick them up. Prove me wrong. 42 phones were recording now, the moment too dramatic to miss, too perfect for social media. Dominic stared at the keys, then at Diana, then at the crowd of strangers watching a humiliation ritual they didn't quite have the courage to interrupt. His voice came out level, no anger coloring it, just simple statement of fact. I'm not a dog, Mrs. Blackwood. Gasps punctuated the silence. Someone's champagne glass trembled. Evelyn Hartford leaned forward incrementally, interest intensifying. Diana's face flushed, control slipping. Excuse me. I said I'm not a dog. If you want me to examine your car, ask me like a human being. If you want to insult me, do it honestly. But don't throw keys at my feet and expect me to fetch. The silence achieved new depths. Air conditioning hum, suddenly audible, someone's nervous breathing loud in the stillness. Diana had painted herself into a corner, her performance demanding escalation she couldn't quite execute with 42 cameras recording. Her voice pitched higher, losing the measured control. How dare you speak to me that way in front of... Dominic interrupted, throwing her earlier words back with quiet precision. Some people are born to create, Mrs. Blackwood. Others are born to clean. But everyone deserves basic respect. Diana bent down, snatching the keys with movements too sharp to appear dignified. She crossed the distance between them, each shoving the keys into Dominic's shirt pocket with force that bordered on violence. Her hand patted his chest, twice the gesture unmistakably similar to praising a pet. 5 mechanics with MIT degrees failed. You're welcome to train, but we both know someone like you can't succeed where they failed. She turned away, the crowd parting with the uncomfortable eagerness of people avoiding association with cruelty they'd witnessed but not prevented. Dominic stood alone in the center of the showroom, keys pressed against his chest, 42 cameras capturing his reaction. He offered them nothing. No anger, no humiliation, no satisfaction of visible emotion. Just steady breathing and the patience that comes from knowing that truth eventually surfaces. Evelyn Hartford's face held calculation, now the look of someone assembling pieces of a puzzle they hadn't realized needed solving. 20 minutes later, Nathan found Dominic in the storage corridor organizing cleaning supplies with methodical precision that suggested he was processing something larger than inventory management. Jesus Christ, Dom! What were you thinking? Diana will destroy you for that. Dominic continued, sorting microfiber cloths by size, voice empty of emotion. She already tried. Nathan's confusion showed in his posture, shoulders tense with secondhand anxiety. What do you mean? Dominic pulled out his tablet, navigating to email archives with the ease of someone who'd reviewed them many times. The screen showed a message sent 3 weeks earlier, subject line clear, Ferrari 488 GTB diagnostic report. Urgent attention required. Recipient Diana.Blackwood at Blackwood Motors. Com date September 8, 2024. Status delivered to spam folder, sender D. Carter at cleaning staff. Blackwood. Com. Nathan took the tablet, reading with increasing disbelief. The email body laid out everything with technical precision. Thermal analysis showing stress patterns in the intake manifold mounting system. Acoustic frequency measurements detecting harmonic resonance at 847 Hz. Root cause identified as microfractures in an aluminum bracket. Ferrari part number 298847B, developing from repeated thermal cycling between ambient temperature and operating heat. The solution, $45 bracket replacement installation requiring exact engine temperature of 73 degrees Celsius to ensure proper thermal expansion alignment. 90 minutes of labor. Total cost $225 versus $8,000 already spent chasing symptoms instead of disease. Nathan's hands shook slightly, tablet trembling. How did you diagnose this? You don't have access to diagnostic equipment. You're not certified to. Dominic opened his cleaning cart, revealing the hidden tools with the calm of someone who'd anticipated this conversation. 3 months' salary. Bought it piece by piece over 2 years. The infrared thermometer in its spray bottle disguise. The digital stethoscope. The vibration sensors. The tablet running oscilloscope analysis software capable of frequency detection beyond human hearing. Nathan stared at the equipment, then at Dominic, then back at the email showing 3 weeks of ignored expertise. Why didn't you tell anyone you could do this? The question hung in the air between them. Answer obvious to anyone who'd spent time at Blackwood Motors observing which voices mattered and which didn't. Who would listen to the cleaning guy? Nathan had no response to that, the truth of it settling like dust after an explosion. Diana's desperate Dom. If Evelyn Hartford's order falls through $2.1 million in Lamborghinis, this company is finished. Diana's been hemorrhaging money for 8 months. The Ferrari situation is just, I know. 2 words flat delivery stopping Nathan mid-sentence. You know what? Dominic pulled up a different folder on his tablet, this one labeled simply, Documentation, 6 years. The spreadsheet opened like an indictment. 7 former employees, termination dates spanning from 2018 to early 2024, each entry annotated with the official reason given for dismissal. Cultural fit issues, presentation standards, client comfort concerns. Every phrase carefully neutral, legally defensible, functionally identical in outcome. Nathan scrolled through the data, skin paling as patterns emerged with statistical certainty. All 7 employees Black or Latino. All 7 skilled workers with positive performance reviews. All 7 replaced within 3 weeks by less qualified white employees. Average tenure for minority workers, 8.3 months. Average tenure for white employees, 4.1 years. Termination rate for minority employees, 100% within 12 months. Termination rate for white employees, 12% within 12 months. You've been investigating her, Dominic's correction came swift and precise. Documenting. There's a difference. Investigation implies I'm looking for something. Documentation means I'm recording what I already see. Nathan set the tablet down carefully as if it might explode. Why go through all this? Dominic's voice carried weight that hadn't been there before, personal history transforming into something larger. Because my daughter asked me a question last week that I couldn't answer honestly. The memory surfaced sharp and painful. Breakfast table Zoe eating cereal casual question that had cut deeper than she'd intended. Daddy, why do you always use the back door at work? Dominic had fumbled the answer. Something about convenience and efficiency, words tasting like lies even as he spoke them. Zoe had pressed 8-year-old logic exposing adult evasion. But Mr. Nathan uses the front door, and he started after you. Is it because you're Black and he's white? The question had landed like a physical blow, forcing Dominic to confront what he'd been accepting as normal. He was teaching his daughter that discrimination was something to accommodate rather than challenge. Teaching her that using the service entrance was just easier than demanding equal access. Teaching her invisibility as survival strategy. Present-day Nathan looked stricken, comprehending his role in a system he'd never questioned because it benefited him. Dom, I know you're not intentionally cruel. You're just complicit. There's a difference, but the outcome looks pretty similar from where I'm standing. The words hung between them, not quite accusation, but nowhere near absolution. I'm not doing this for me anymore, Nathan. I'm doing it for her, because I will not teach my daughter that this is acceptable. Diana's office door slammed in the distance, the sound carrying through the showroom with the finality of decisions being made. Nathan flinched at the noise, already anticipating consequences. She's going to come after you. After what happened out there, after you embarrassed her in front of Evelyn Hartford. Let her come. The confidence in Dominic's voice didn't match his economic position or employment status, deriving from something deeper than job security. I've got 3 weeks of documentation proving I can diagnose that Ferrari. I've got 6 years of evidence showing systematic discrimination. And I've got 42 witnesses who just watched her drop keys at my feet like I'm some kind of pet project. Nathan started to respond, cut off by a knock that preceded the door opening without waiting for permission. Evelyn Hartford stood in the doorway, $70,000 of understated elegance and the particular authority that comes from never needing to announce net worth because everyone already knew it. Her voice carried the crisp precision of expensive education and old money confidence. Diana, we need to discuss Dominic Carter and whether you want to keep my $2.1 million. Diana's face, visible through the office window, went from flushed to white in the space between heartbeats. Nathan backed out of the corridor, carefully recognizing when his presence had become obstacle rather than asset. Dominic stayed where he was, organizing cleaning supplies that didn't need organizing, listening to the beginning of a conversation that would reshape everything. Evelyn's voice carried despite the closed door intended to carry, making sure Nathan and Dominic both heard. That performance in the showroom was unacceptable. Not because you challenged an employee, but because you humiliated a human being in front of clients who will absolutely remember this. I will remember this. Diana's response came muffled, defensive. It was just theater, entertainment for... It was racism, Diana. Coded, polite, legally defensible racism. I've been in luxury markets for 40 years. I know what it looks like when people mistake credentials for competence and mistake skin color for incompetence. Silence, then. Diana's voice pitched higher with desperation. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. The company is failing because you've been making bad decisions for 8 months. I understand perfectly. What I don't understand is why you ignored a diagnostic report that could have saved you $8,000 in considerable embarrassment. Another silence, longer this time. I don't know what you're talking about. The email from Dominic Carter, September 8th, detailed analysis of your Ferrari problem, sitting in your spam folder because it came from someone you'd categorized as unworthy of attention. Diana's voice dropped to barely audible. How do you know about that? Because unlike you, I ask questions and listen to answers. Nathan showed me the email this morning after I asked why your Ferrari was still broken. $45 part, Diana. 90 minutes of labor. Instead, you spent $8,000 proving that credentials don't automatically translate to competence. Footsteps approached the door. Evelyn emerged, first face composed, but eyes holding something that looked like satisfaction. She nodded to Dominic, acknowledgement between people who recognize capability regardless of job title. Diana appeared in the doorway, perfect composure fracturing around the edges. Her eyes found Dominic hatred mixing with fear in expression that promised retaliation despite lacking clear avenue for it. This conversation isn't over. Dominic met her gaze without flinching. No, ma'am, I expect it's just beginning. Evelyn's slight smile suggested she agreed, though which direction that beginning would take remained unclear. The afternoon light shifted as they stood there, three people at different points on power's spectrum, all recognizing that something had changed in ways that couldn't be easily reversed. Somewhere in Inglewood, Zoe Carter worked on her science fair project, calculating baking soda ratios with the precision her father brought to diagnosing machines. She didn't know yet that the questions she'd asked about back doors and front doors had set something in motion that would reshape both their futures. But Dominic knew. Standing in a storage corridor with keys to a Ferrari pressed against his chest and 6 years of documentation waiting to prove systematic discrimination, he understood that invisibility had finally outlived its usefulness. His grandmother's voice echoed across 23 years. Machines don't lie, baby. People do. The truth was coming, ready or not. Sunday morning brought Pacific wind across Santa Monica Beach, salt air mixing with sunscreen, and the particular smell of wet sand that defined California coastlines. Dominic spread a blanket while Zoe ran ahead, shoes already abandoned near the parking lot, her 8-year-old energy uncontainable despite the early hour. The video had gone viral overnight. 1.2 million views by dawn, TikTok algorithms amplifying the footage of keys hitting marble floors and a black man refusing to bend. Dominic's phone had accumulated 374 notifications. He hadn't opened messages from strangers offering support or condemnation in equal measure. Zoe returned with a bucket determination written across her features. Daddy, did you really win a Ferrari? Everybody at school saw a video. The question carried weight beyond curiosity, testing whether the version of events spreading through social media matched reality or represented another adult complication she'd need to navigate. Not yet, baby, maybe. She knelt beside him, beginning the architectural planning that preceded sandcastle construction with the seriousness some people brought to actual blueprints. The red one, the pretty one. That's the one. Her hands shaped sand into foundational walls, precise despite lacking tools beyond her fingers. Can we keep it? We could sell it and pay rent forever. The practicality of the statement hit harder than intended, 8 years old, already calculating financial security in terms of luxury car liquidation. Dominic had tried to shield her from economic anxiety, but poverty had a way of teaching lessons regardless of parental intent. We'll see, baby. It's complicated. Zoe's skepticism showed in the way she patted sand into place, not arguing, but clearly unconvinced that complications ever resolved in their favor. They built in companionable silence for 20 minutes, the kind of peace that came from shared activity rather than conversation. Other families dotted the beach, children shrieking in waves, parents arranging picnic supplies, with the ease that came from having enough resources that beach days represented leisure rather than free entertainment. Can we go look at cars? Zoe's request emerged casual, but Dominic recognized the hope underneath. She'd been asking to visit dealerships for months, fascinated by machines the way he'd been at her age inheritance expressing itself across generations. Sure, there's a place near here. The dealership occupied a corner lot in West Los Angeles, glass walls showcasing inventory worth more than most people earned in lifetimes. Lamborghinis and Porsches arranged like jewelry, each vehicle positioned to catch light in ways that suggested art rather than transportation. The salesman noticed them immediately upon entry, his smile professional, until his eyes registered Dominic's thrift store jacket and Zoe's generic sneakers. The expression didn't change overtly, but something shifted in the warmth behind it, calculation replacing the welcome. Can I help you folks? The question came polite enough, though the emphasis on help carried implications about whether assistance would be needed or wanted. Zoe bounced forward, innocence preventing her from reading subtext that Dominic caught instantly. My daddy's gonna get a Ferrari, a red one. He fixed it when nobody else could. The salesman's professionalism fractured slightly, doubt visible in the way his gaze traveled from Zoe to Dominic to the cars surrounding them. Is that so? Two words, flat delivery, communicating disbelief more clearly than paragraphs. He turned toward a colleague standing near the Lamborghini display, voice loud enough to ensure Dominic heard. Steve, keep an eye on inventory. Apparently everyone's getting Ferraris these days. The implication landed like a slap suggestion of theft hanging in the air between them. Steve nodded, hand moving to his radio in a gesture that managed to be both casual and threatening simultaneously. Security already stood near the entrance, attention shifting toward Dominic with the particular focus that black men learned to recognize early and never forgot. Zoe remained oblivious, drifting towards a Lamborghini Huracan displayed on a raised platform. Her hand reached out, fingers extending toward the carbon fiber spoiler with the reverence reserved for beautiful things you've been told not to touch. The salesman crossed the distance faster than seemed necessary, his hand closing around Zoe's wrist with force that stopped just short of bruising. Don't touch that. These are for serious buyers, not... Dominic moved before conscious thought completed every protective instinct his grandmother had cultivated, roaring to life in the space between heartbeats. His voice dropped to a register that bypassed politeness, entirely landing somewhere primal and absolute. Take your hand off my daughter, right now. The salesman released Zoe's wrist but held his ground, authority challenged, and responding with the petty cruelty available to people whose power derived from gatekeeping rather than expertise. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you both to leave. This is a high-end establishment, and we cater to qualified buyers who what say it, say what you're thinking. The challenge hung there, daring the salesman to voice the racism that had been implicit in every interaction since they'd entered. Security approached now, two men moving with a coordinated purpose that suggested they'd done this before removing people who didn't belong from spaces designed to exclude them. Dominic knelt beside Zoe, whose confusion was transforming into tears, 8 years old, trying to understand what social rules she'd violated. Come on, baby. We're leaving. Outside in parking lot, sunlight, Zoe's crying intensified the kind of sobbing that comes from injustice you lack framework to process. Daddy, what did I do wrong? I just wanted to see the cars. I wasn't going to break anything. I wasn't going to steal anything. Dominic pulled her close, feeling her shake against his chest, fury and helplessness warring inside him, while he searched for words that would explain systemic racism to an 8-year-old without destroying the innocence she deserved to keep a little longer. You didn't do anything wrong, Zoe. Not one single thing. Some people see our skin before they see our hearts, and that's their sickness, not yours. That's their failure, not ours. She pulled back slightly, gap-toothed mouth trembling. Is that why Mrs. Blackwood threw the keys at your feet? The question revealed how much she'd understood, how much the viral video had exposed her to realities he'd tried to shield her from. 8 years old, already learning that her father's humiliation could become entertainment for strangers. Baby, how did you know about that? TikTok. Everyone at school saw it. They said mean things about you, about us. The words landed like physical blows, each one confirming that his attempts to keep her separate from adult ugliness had failed completely. This wasn't just about him anymore. Wasn't just about dignified resistance or documentation for future justice. His daughter was being hurt by the same system that had been crushing him for 6 months. He cupped her face in his hands, making sure she met his eyes. Listen to me, Zoe. You are bigger than their hate. You are bigger than their fear. You are my whole sky, and nothing they say will ever change that. Nothing they do will ever make you less than extraordinary. The phrase settled between them, familiar anchor in unfamiliar waters. Zoe's breathing steadied incrementally, though tears still tracked down her cheeks. Are you going to do something? The question demanded honesty, requiring him to either commit to action or admit defeat in ways that would teach her lessons he refused to impart. Yes, Thursday. I'm going to do something that matters. Monday morning transformed Blackwood Motors conference room into war room, Diana presiding over emergency session with the tight control of someone watching empire crumble in real time. Nathan sat to her left, legal counsel to her right via speakerphone, and Robert Blackwood directly across, his presence unexpected, given that he typically avoided operational meetings. Diana's husband at 45 carried the particular weariness that came from complicity. You were just beginning to recognize his role as CFO, keeping him insulated from daily operations while benefiting from their financial outcomes. He'd arrived 20 minutes early, asking Nathan questions about Saturday's incident with the careful attention of someone assembling evidence. The video has 800,000 views, trending on 3 platforms. Evelyn Hartford called me last night. Diana's voice carried the brittleness of crystal under pressure, each word precisely articulated to prevent fracturing. She's reconsidering her order, $2.1 million walking out the door because one employee decided to make a scene. The attorney's voice crackled through the speaker, professionally neutral, in ways that suggested he'd already calculated the legal liability. The statement was made publicly, Diana. Multiple witnesses recorded you offering the Ferrari to Mr. Carter if he successfully completed the repair. Depending on how we argue consideration and intent, that could constitute a binding verbal contract. I was joking, entertainment for clients. No reasonable person would interpret that as... Nathan cleared his throat, the sound carrying more weight than interruption should. He'd brought his laptop screen angled so Diana couldn't see it yet. Actually, Diana, we need to discuss something else. He rotated the computer, displaying an email that Robert had seen earlier that Nathan had shown Evelyn Hartford Saturday morning that represented the smoking gun nobody had wanted to acknowledge. Subject: Ferrari 488 GTB diagnostic report. Urgent attention required from D. Carter at cleaning staff. Blackwood. Com to Diana. Blackwood at Blackwood Motors. Com date September 8, 2024. 6:47 a.m. Status spam folder. Unread. Diana's face drained of color as she read comprehension arriving in stages. The thermal analysis. The acoustic frequency measurements. The specific part number and installation requirements. The cost comparison: $225 versus $8,000 already spent. Her voice emerged small, defeated. Why wasn't I informed? Nathan's response held no satisfaction, just tired statement of fact. Your spam filter categorized it as low priority because it came from a cleaning staff email address. The solution has been sitting in your inbox for 3 weeks, while you spent $8,000 proving that you don't read messages from people you've categorized as unworthy of attention. Robert leaned forward, speaking for the first time since the meeting began. Diana, I need to tell you something. I'm filing for divorce. Tomorrow. My attorney's drawing up papers tonight. The announcement landed like detonation, Diana's attention fragmenting between professional crisis and personal collapse. Robert, this isn't the time. This is exactly the time. I've been complicit in this for too long, focused on balance sheets while you systematically destroyed people's careers. I didn't know the extent of it until Nathan showed me documentation this morning. 6 years, Diana. 6 years of targeting Black and Latino employees. The attorney's voice cut through the speaker, attempting damage control. Mr. Blackwood, I strongly advise you not to make statements that could be used. I don't care about legal liability anymore. I care that I've spent 8 years married to someone I apparently don't know. Someone who ignores brilliant diagnostic work because it came from the wrong email address. Someone who humiliates employees in front of clients for entertainment. Diana's hands shook, fury and fear competing for dominance. You don't understand the pressure. My father built this company on... Your father built this company on values that should have died with him, and you've been maintaining those values like they're sacred tradition instead of systematic oppression. Silence settled heavy, broken only by the attorney's careful breathing through the phone speaker. Diana's voice emerged harder now, desperation transforming into something uglier. Fine, you want a divorce file. You want to take his side, do it. But I am not letting some cleaning person destroy what my family built. Nathan, I want a complete background check on Dominic Carter. Employment history, criminal record, credit report, everything. There has to be something we can use. Robert stood chair scraping against floor. That's retaliation, Diana, illegal retaliation. It's due diligence. We're potentially allowing an uncertified individual to work on a $340,000 vehicle. I'm being responsible. The justification rang hollow even as she spoke it, but Diana's expression suggested she'd committed to the narrative, regardless of its relationship to truth. Nathan watched them both caught between loyalty to employer and growing recognition that loyalty might be misplaced. The meeting dissolved into bitter silence, Robert leaving first attorney, disconnecting without pleasantries, Diana alone with her laptop displaying an email she should have read 3 weeks ago. Evelyn Hartford's estate in Bel Air occupied enough acreage that neighbors remained theoretical, rather than actual privacy maintained through geography and landscaping that cost more than most people's mortgages. She sat in her study Monday afternoon, phone pressed to her ear or speaking with Dominic Carter with a directness that came from never needing to waste time on pleasantries. Mr. Carter, I did some research over the weekend. You're a ghost. No employment history before Blackwood Motors. No social media presence. No digital footprint whatsoever. Either you're remarkably private or you have a past you'd prefer to keep quiet. Dominic's voice came through clear, careful. I value my privacy, Mrs. Hartford. I'm sure you do, but I'm about to potentially invest significant resources in supporting you, which means I need to know, can you actually fix that Ferrari? Yes, ma'am. How certain? 100% aluminum mounting bracket Ferrari part number 298847B. Microfractures from thermal stress. When engine reaches operating temperature between 92 and 95 Celsius and RPM exceeds 3,200, the damaged bracket vibrates at harmonic frequency of 847 Hz. This creates resonance that disrupts intake manifold seal integrity, causing random stalling that appears electrical to computer diagnostics but is actually mechanical. Evelyn had spent 40 years in luxury markets, heard countless sales pitches and technical explanations. This was neither. This was expertise delivered with the casual precision of someone who knew their field so thoroughly that complexity became simple. You just recited Ferrari technical specifications from memory, including harmonic frequencies most mechanics couldn't identify with equipment, and you work as a car detailer. Nobody would hire me as a mechanic. No degree, no ASC certification, no formal training documents. Just 20 years of listening to machines and teaching myself what schools wouldn't teach me. Why not get certified? Certification courses cost $8,000 to $12,000. I have a daughter and $58 in my bank account. I chose rent over credentials. The honesty landed with weight that rehearsed answers never achieved. Evelyn made notes on the pad beside her, adding Dominic's name to a list that included her attorney, her accountant, and Dr. Catherine Pierce. Mrs. Hartford, can I ask you a question? Of course. Why are you helping me? You don't know me. You've got no stake in whether Diana Blackwood keeps her company or loses everything. Evelyn set down her pen, considering how much truth to share. 40 years ago, I was nobody. Daughter of a factory worker, first in my family to finish college. I interviewed for a position at a consulting firm, qualified but unconnected. The managing partner looked at my resume and said I didn't have the right background, by which he meant my father assembled cars rather than owning companies. She paused, memory sharp despite decades. Another partner overheard, woman named Catherine Leeds. She walked into that interview, looked at the managing partner, and told him that talent recognizes talent regardless of pedigree. She hired me over his objection. I spent 30 years building wealth that let me retire at 52. Catherine died last year. Lung cancer. At her funeral, I promised I'd pay it forward when the opportunity arose. I'm that opportunity. You're that opportunity. Talented, dismissed, judged by irrelevant criteria instead of actual competence. So yes, Mr. Carter, I'm helping you. Because someone helped me, and because Diana Blackwood represents everything that needs to change about how we recognize and reward excellence. They spoke for another 20 minutes, Evelyn gathering information while Dominic answered questions with the wariness of someone accustomed to interrogation disguised as interest. When they disconnected, Evelyn had enough to proceed, enough to justify the next call she needed to make. Dr. Catherine Pierce answered on the second ring, her office at UCLA visible through video connection walls lined with technical manuals and framed certifications that represented decades of expertise. Evelyn, I've been expecting your call. I saw the video. What's your assessment? Catherine pulled up files on her screen, technical reports and analysis that Evelyn couldn't decipher from this angle. If Dominic Carter's diagnostic report is accurate, and I have no reason to believe it isn't, then he's identified a failure mode that 5 certified mechanics completely missed. The methodology combining acoustic analysis with thermal mapping represents innovation beyond current industry standards. Can you verify his work publicly, professionally on record? I can do better than that. I want to test him first. Wednesday before the showcase. If he's as good as this report suggests, I'm recommending him for our research position at UCLA. Full tuition benefits, annual stipend of $52,000. His techniques deserve academic study. Evelyn smiled, pieces falling into alignment. Thursday at 1. Diana's having another showcase to try, recovering from Saturday's disaster. Be there at noon. I'll make sure Dominic has access to the Ferrari. The calls began Tuesday evening. Dominic's phone lighting up with numbers he didn't recognize. Voices from the past emerging to confirm patterns he'd already documented. Maria Santos spoke with the particular anger that comes from injustice delayed but not forgotten. Latina accent carrying traces of East LA neighborhoods she'd grown up in before Blackwood Motors had temporarily lifted her into different economic strata. Mr. Carter, my name is Maria Santos. I worked at Blackwood Motors from March 2019 to November 2020. Diana fired me for cultural fit issues, code for being Latina, and refusing to lie to clients about unnecessary repairs. Dominic put her on speaker, taking notes while she talked. She told me I made clients uncomfortable. My client satisfaction scores were 94% higher than company average. But she needed documentation for termination, so she created it. I have emails, her directing HR to find problems that didn't exist. I kept everything. Why didn't you fight it? With what money? I was a single mother with 2 kids. I needed another job, not a lawsuit. But I've been following your story. If you're building a case, I want in. Jerome Washington called 20 minutes later, voice carrying the exhaustion of someone who'd spent 18 months rebuilding a career that shouldn't have been destroyed in the first place. Diana put me in a different uniform. Said it was because I was newer, but the white guy who started 3 weeks after me got standard uniform day 1. When I asked about it, suddenly my performance reviews mentioned issues that had never been documented before. I was gone within 3 months. The pattern repeated across 7 calls, each former employee describing variations on the same theme. Coded language, created documentation, systematic removal of talented workers whose presence apparently offended Diana's vision of what Blackwood Motors should represent. The final call came from a number Dominic recognized, Robert Blackwood's personal cell. Mr. Carter, this is Robert Blackwood. I need you to know I'm filing for divorce tomorrow morning. I also need to warn you, Diana is conducting a background check, trying to find anything she can use to discredit you. Let her look. She won't find anything. I know. That's what terrifies her. A black man she can't control or destroy through usual channels. She's desperate, which makes her dangerous. Be careful Thursday. Why are you telling me this? Robert's sigh carried the weight of complicity recognized too late. Because I've been part of this system for 8 years without questioning it. Focused on spreadsheets while my wife destroyed lives. That's not an excuse, just an explanation. I can't undo the past, but I can try to prevent future damage. Good luck Thursday, Mr. Carter. I hope you get that Ferrari. UCLA's engineering laboratory smelled like machine oil and academic ambition, workbenches covered with disassembled engines, and diagnostic equipment that cost more than Dominic earned in a year. Catherine Pierce waited beside a Porsche engine mounted on a testing frame, her expression carrying the particular skepticism scientists reserve for claims that seemed too good to be true. Evelyn Hartford said you diagnosed a Ferrari by listening to it. No computer interface, no spectral analysis, just acoustic observation. Dominic nodded, aware he was being evaluated, tested before being trusted. Acoustic analysis combined with thermal mapping. Harmonic frequencies reveal structural stress patterns that computer diagnostics miss because they're programmed to find electrical failures, not mechanical resonance. Catherine gestured to a laptop connected to speakers, audio file queued and ready. I'm going to play an engine sound. No context, no additional information. Tell me what you hear. She pressed play. The sound filled the lab mechanical symphony that most people would categorize simply as engine noise, without further differentiation. Dominic closed his eyes, filtering out ambient sound, focusing on the frequencies and patterns hidden inside the obvious. 30 seconds passed. Catherine's expression shifted from skepticism towards something approaching respect. Dominic opened his eyes. Bearing where? not transmission noise, which is what most mechanics would diagnose given the frequency range. This is 1240 Hz too regular for random mechanical failure. Classic ball bearing deterioration signature. Based on the harmonic progression, I'd estimate 40 to 50,000 miles on the bearing needs replacement within 5,000 miles before catastrophic failure occurs. Catherine's hands moved across her keyboard, pulling up data that had been hidden from view. Her voice emerged, quiet professional composure fracturing slightly. That recording came from a 2019 Porsche 911 GT3. The bearing failed at 47,000 miles, exactly within your predicted range. I've worked with Ferrari factory engineers in Maranello who couldn't identify acoustic frequencies that precisely without spectral analysis equipment. She closed the laptop, full attention on Dominic now. Equipment only finds what it's programmed to look for, Dr. Pierce. I listen for what it's not looking for. Anomalies, patterns, the silence between the noise that tells you something's wrong before obvious symptoms appear. Catherine pulled out her phone, typing rapidly while she spoke. Mr. Carter, I'm attending Diana's showcase Thursday. If you repair that Ferrari successfully, I will verify your work publicly, professionally on the record. And I will personally recommend you for our research assistant position. Full tuition benefits, $52,000 annual stipend, access to equipment and resources that will let you formalize the methodologies you've developed independently. Opportunity hung in the air between them, the kind that Dominic had been chasing for 20 years without ever quite reaching. He managed 2 words past the tightness in his throat. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Fix the Ferrari first. Prove that your diagnosis was accurate. Then we'll discuss gratitude and next steps. Tuesday afternoon brought Diana's attempted termination, her office door closing with finality that suggested she'd already decided the outcome before Dominic arrived. Nathan stood near the window, present but visibly uncomfortable with the proceedings. Dominic, I'm terminating your employment effective immediately. Her voice carried the crisp authority of someone accustomed to exercising power without accountability, each word precisely delivered. On what grounds, Mrs. Blackwood? Insubordination, creating a hostile work environment, making clients uncomfortable with your confrontational behavior. I declined to pick up keys you threw at my feet. That's not insubordination, that's basic human dignity. Diana's composure cracked slightly, fury leaking through professional veneer. You embarrassed this company. That video has 1.2 million views. Our reputation, Nathan interrupted, voice steady despite obvious tension. Diana, you can't fire him. She turned, attention shifting like a weapon, seeking new target. Excuse me. California Labor Code Section 102.5. Whistleblower protection. Dominic documented discrimination patterns which I've verified exist. If you terminate him now within 6 months of those complaints, it creates legal presumption of retaliation. Wrongful termination lawsuit. He could sue for 10 times his annual salary plus punitive damages. Diana's attorney had apparently briefed her on this possibility, recognition flashing across her face before she could suppress it. I'm not retaliating. I'm addressing legitimate performance. You're retaliating because he refused to be humiliated and because Evelyn Hartford is watching. Fire him today and she cancels her order tomorrow. You know I'm right. Silence stretched between them, Diana calculating odds and finding no winning scenario. Her voice emerged tight with controlled rage. Fine. You keep your chum for now, but stay out of my sight until Thursday. Dominic stood, recognizing dismissal. Yes, ma'am. I'll be here Thursday at 1 with my diagnostic equipment, ready to prove that your spam folder cost you $8,000 and whatever remains of your credibility. He left before she could respond, Nathan following him into the corridor. Dom, be careful. She's desperate. Desperate people do stupid things. I'm counting on it. Late Tuesday night, Dominic's apartment silent except for the hum of his laptop and the distant sounds of neighbors living lives that didn't include documenting systematic discrimination. Zoe slept in their shared bedroom, science fair poster visible on the wall above her bed, dreams presumably simpler than the reality her father navigated daily. The files Nathan had leaked transformed documentation from statistical pattern into smoking gun evidence. Emails Diana had thought private correspondence with HR that revealed not unconscious bias, but deliberate conspiracy. March 2019. Diana to HR Director. I need documentation of performance issues for Santos. Client complaints, procedural errors, anything usable. We need paper trail before termination. HR response. Maria's client satisfaction rating is 94.2%, above company average of 88%. No documented complaints in file. Diana's reply, then create documentation. I will not have clients walking into this showroom and seeing that. Find something or I'll find someone who will. 6 more email chains followed identical patterns. Instructions to fabricate problems, create paper trails. Manufacture justifications for decisions already made based on criteria that could never be spoken aloud or written down explicitly. Dominic downloaded everything to encrypted cloud storage, created backup copies on 3 separate drives, sent password-protected archives to his own email under subject lines that looked like spam to ensure they wouldn't be deleted if someone gained access to his account. The documentation proved what statistics had suggested: this wasn't unconscious bias or isolated incidents. This was systematic, deliberate 6 years of destroying careers because they didn't match Diana Blackwood's vision of who deserved opportunities. His phone lit up with a text from Nathan. She's going to come after you tomorrow. Be ready. Dominic typed back, I've been ready for 6 months. See you Thursday. Wednesday evening transformed the small apartment into staging ground, Dominic reviewing his diagnostic equipment while Zoe worked on homework at the kitchen table. Science fair poster, nearly complete, her calculations precise despite using library computers because home internet remained luxury they couldn't consistently afford. Daddy, you're coming to the science fair Saturday, right? The question carried more weight than its words suggested, testing whether Thursday's confrontation would destroy the promise he'd made. Baby, I need to talk to you about something important. Zoe set down her pencil, attention shifting with the seriousness children reserve for moments they sense matter. You have to work. No, I'm going to do something important Thursday afternoon. And then Saturday I'll be at your science fair. Front row. Promise on Grandma Ellie's memory. She studied his face, searching for truth or evasion, finding something that satisfied her. What are you doing Thursday? Remember when you asked me why I used the back door at work? She nodded, gap-toothed mouth, serious. Thursday, I'm going to walk through the front door, and I'm going to show people that being black doesn't mean being less, that talent doesn't need permission from people who refuse to see it, that your daddy is worth exactly as much as anyone else in that building, regardless of what my job title says. Zoe processed this with 8-year-old wisdom that sometimes surpassed adult comprehension. Are you scared? Honesty seemed more important than comfort. Terrified. Grandma Ellie would be proud of you. The words landed with force that nearly broke him. Eleanor's legacy, speaking through a granddaughter who'd never met her values, transmitting across generations despite death's interruption. Dominic pulled Zoe close, voice thick with emotion he didn't try to hide. You're bigger than the whole sky, baby. Bigger than anyone who ever doubted us. And tomorrow I'm going to prove that to everyone who needs to learn it. She hugged him back, small arms carrying strength that had nothing to do with physical force. I believe you, Daddy. I always believe you. Diana's office at 11 p.m. resembled war room more than executive space, documents scattered across her desk, phone pressed to her ear while her attorney delivered news she didn't want to hear. Diana, final warning. If Carter actually fixes that Ferrari tomorrow, you'll be legally, socially, and financially cornered. That video of your promise is admissible evidence. Evelyn Hartford has resources and motivation. Dr. Pierce's expert testimony adds credibility. Your husband just filed for divorce, which means he can testify against you without spousal privilege protecting anything. You need to settle. He won't fix it. 5 MIT-trained specialists couldn't solve it. But if he does, then I'll burn it all down before I let some cleaning person take what's mine. The attorney's sigh carried resignation. That's not a legal strategy, Diana. That's emotional reaction that will cost you everything. Give him the car. Apologize publicly. Move on. Cut your losses. You don't understand. My father built this company. He told me before he died that I had to maintain standards, keep out people who would lower what we'd built. If I let Carter win, I'm betraying everything my father believed in. Your father's beliefs don't matter anymore. He's dead. You're alive and facing federal discrimination investigation if this escalates. Be smart. Diana hung up without responding, staring at the photograph on her desk. Her father at the company's groundbreaking 2009, his expression stern and certain, a man who'd never questioned whether his certainties might be wrong. She'd spent 15 years trying to live up to his expectations, maintaining traditions he'd established, protecting values he'd instilled. The thought of failing him, of letting some outsider destroy what he'd built, hurt worse than potential bankruptcy or public humiliation. Her phone showed 11:47 p.m., 8 hours until the showcase that would determine whether Blackwood Motors survived or collapsed. 8 hours until Dominic Carter either proved himself or failed spectacularly. Diana pulled up the background check results her investigator had delivered that afternoon. Clean record, No arrests, no lawsuits, no scandals, just 20 years of steady work paying bills, raising a daughter alone after his wife died. Nothing usable, nothing that would discredit him or justify denying him the Ferrari if he succeeded. She closed the laptop exhausted by hatred she couldn't sustain but couldn't quite release. Tomorrow would bring resolution one way or another. Either Carter would fail and she'd be vindicated, or he'd succeed and everything would change in ways she couldn't control. Diana looked at her father's photograph one final time, seeking guidance that couldn't arrive, hoping for approval that would never come. "I'm sorry, Daddy. I don't know how to fix this." The photograph offered no answers, just silent judgment from a dead man whose values had created the crisis his daughter now faced alone. Thursday arrived with the weight of inevitability. Southern California sunshine indifferent to the confrontations it would illuminate. Blackwood Motors opened at noon for a showcase that felt more like funeral preparations than sales event staff moving through their routines with the awareness that witness to history carried different responsibilities than ordinary workdays. 38 clients returned, fewer than Saturday's original 42. Some wealthy patrons having decided that association with viral racism might prove more expensive than missing exclusive inventory. Those who came brought heightened attention, phones charged, and ready, social media primed to document whatever resolution emerged from 3 days of escalating tension. Diana stood near her office, makeup perfect, but eyes carrying shadows that suggested sleep had been theoretical rather than actual. She'd chosen a navy suit that photographed well armor, disguised as professionalism, each detail calculated for cameras that would judge her regardless of outcome. Evelyn Hartford arrived at 12:40, 15 minutes, fashionably late, in a way that communicated power through temporal flexibility. Catherine Pierce accompanied her, the two women representing expertise and resources that transformed this from business dispute into something approaching reckoning. Dominic waited near the service entrance equipment cart, prepared diagnostic tools hidden beneath cleaning supplies in patterns now familiar from 6 months of concealment. Nathan found him there, tension written across features that had been merely uncomfortable Saturday, but had progressed to something resembling dread. "Dom, she's planning something. I don't know what, but she's too calm. Diana doesn't do calm when she's losing. Let her plan. I've got 3 weeks of documentation and 42 witnesses from Saturday. Whatever she's plotting won't change mathematics or physics." The showroom filled with wealthy bodies and expensive perfume champagne distributed with the ritualistic precision that accompanied these events. Diana began her presentation with forced confidence, words about excellence and standards ringing hollow against the backdrop of her viral humiliation still trending across multiple platforms. Evelyn interrupted with the casual authority of someone accustomed to controlling conversations through simple participation. "Diana, I'd like your details specialist to examine the Ferrari. Dominic Carter. Now, please." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, phones rising like digital torches prepared to capture whatever followed. Diana's smile achieved new levels of artificial brightness, stress fractures visible in the corners if you knew where to look. "This is highly irregular, Evelyn. Mr. Carter isn't a certified mechanic. Our liability insurance doesn't cover." Catherine stepped forward, credentials hanging invisible but heavy in the space between them. "Then I'll verify his analysis and methodology. I'm a Ferrari certified technical consultant with 28 years of experience, including direct collaboration with factory engineers in Maranello. If his diagnosis proves incorrect, I'll document exactly why and how. If it proves correct, you'll have expert validation that your $8,000 was wasted, ignoring competence you'd categorized as impossible." Diana's trap closed around her again, public challenge, leaving no avenue for graceful retreat. Her voice emerged tight, brittle. "1 hour. When he fails and statistical probability suggests he will, this conversation ends permanently." Dominic crossed the showroom with equipment cart, 38 phones, tracking his movement, the click of his work shoes against marble audible in the attentive silence. The Ferrari 488 GTB waited like a test that had already failed 5 certified mechanics, Italian engineering, transformed into referendum on credibility and worth. He began extracting diagnostic tools with deliberate slowness, giving Catherine time to observe and understand. The infrared thermometer emerged from its spray bottle disguise. The digital stethoscope unwrapped from shop rags. Vibration sensors. The tablet running oscilloscope software capable of frequency analysis beyond human hearing. Catherine's professional composure fractured slightly, recognition transforming her expression. "Those are professional-grade diagnostic instruments. That thermal imaging unit alone costs $800 minimum. Where did you acquire this equipment?" "Purchased it myself over 18 months. Saved 3 months' salary. which meant sleeping in my car some weeks because rent and equipment both required resources I didn't have simultaneously. A client near the front gasped the human cost of self-education landing with impact that statistics never achieved. Catherine's next question emerged softer, respectful. Why invest that much in tools for a position that doesn't require them? Because my grandmother taught me that machines don't lie, Dr. Pierce, and I wanted to prove I could hear truths that computers miss when they're programmed by people who stop listening. The phrase settled across the showroom, simple enough for lay people, yet profound enough that Catherine nodded with the recognition experts reserve for legitimate insight. Dominic pressed his ear against the Ferrari's engine block, beginning acoustic analysis that looked primitive to untrained observers, but represented methodology predating digital diagnostics by decades. His hands moved systematically, touching components, feeling for vibrations, cataloging mechanical language most people never learned to speak. Someone in the crowd laughed nervously, the sound quickly suppressed when others turned with expressions suggesting mockery had become socially unacceptable. Catherine addressed the audience with professorial authority, translating expertise into terms that didn't require engineering degrees to comprehend. What Mr. Carter is performing is acoustic frequency analysis. Before computerized diagnostics became standard, this represented primary methodology for identifying mechanical failures. Most modern mechanics have abandoned it in favor of digital systems, but for certain failure modes, particularly harmonic resonance between components, acoustic analysis remains superior because computers only detect anomalies they're programmed to recognize. Dominic moved to the infrared thermometer, mapping engine bay temperatures with precision that generated numbers on his tablet screen. The crowd pressed closer, curiosity overcoming the social distance wealth typically maintained from manual labor. This contact point registers the 23 degrees Celsius above baseline operating specification. Metal on metal friction, where thermal isolation should exist, indicates structural failure in mounting hardware. Catherine pulled out her own thermal imaging equipment, verifying measurements with the thoroughness that professional reputation required. Confirmed. 23.4 degrees above specification. Thermal pattern consistent with mounting bracket failure. Dominic's hand moved to the intake manifold area, fingers tracing invisible fault lines, while his mind processed information visible only through trained interpretation. Here, the source. Catherine applied her digital stethoscope to the indicated location, closing her eyes in concentration that suggested she was translating sound into meaning through processes similar to those Dominic had described. Her eyes opened wide, professional skepticism, transforming into something approaching awe. I'm detecting vibration at 847 hertz, with secondary harmonic at 1239 hertz. That's the exact acoustic signature of thermal stress fracture in aluminum mounting components. This failure mode is documented in Ferrari technical literature, but extremely difficult to diagnose without specialized equipment in training. And 1239.8 hertz, actually. I measured it 3 weeks ago and documented it in my report. The precision landed like accusation, reminding everyone present that solution had been available for weeks, while Diana spent thousands proving that credentials mattered more than competence. Dominic's voice carried across the showroom, explanation delivered in language accessible to non-specialists. The problem is an aluminum mounting bracket, Ferrari part number 298847B. It's developed microfractures from repeated thermal cycling. When the engine reaches operating temperature and RPM exceeds 3200, the compromised bracket vibrates at a frequency that disrupts the intake manifold seal. Computer diagnostics can't detect this because the failure is mechanical rather than electronic, and standard diagnostic protocols aren't programmed to identify harmonic resonance. Diana's voice emerged, desperate, grasping for any argument that might preserve her position. Even if that's accurate, replacing a bracket takes minutes. Why would 5 certified mechanics with advanced degrees miss something so simple? Nathan stepped forward, laptop in hand, projecting Dominic's original email onto the presentation screen where everyone could read it simultaneously. Subject: Ferrari 488 GTB, diagnostic report. Urgent attention required from D. Carter at cleaning staff. Blackwood. Com to Diana, Blackwood at Blackwood Motors. Come date, September 8th, 24, 6:47 a.m. Status, spam folder. Unread. The crowd's attention shifted to the projected text reading thermal analysis and acoustic measurements that had been sitting ignored while $8,000 purchase failure. Dominic continued each sentence, hammering another nail into Diana's credibility. The first mechanic saw irregular combustion in diagnostic logs, diagnosed ECU failure, $2,400. Wrong. The second mechanic detected inconsistent air-fuel ratios, replaced fuel injectors, $1,800. Wrong. The third adjusted ignition timing because combustion patterns appeared irregular, $1,200. Wrong. The fourth ran every diagnostic protocol in Ferrari's service manual. Found nothing because computers only detect electronic failures, not mechanical harmonic resonance. $800 in diagnostic time. Also wrong. All four treated symptoms while the disease sat here, a $45 part causing cascading failures that appeared random to computerized analysis. The mathematics of waste hung in the air, $8,000 versus $225, expertise versus credentials, competence versus assumptions about who deserved to be heard. Evelyn's voice carried the finality of judgment being rendered. Diana, you ignored a detailed technical report because it came from your cleaning staff email domain. You spent $8,000 proving that your prejudice cost money. A courier arrived with timing that suggested Evelyn had orchestrated more than just this confrontation package, containing replacement bracket already expedited from Ferrari's parts network. Dominic accepted it with thanks, opening the packaging to verify part numbers matched specifications. Installation requires precise thermal conditions. Engine temperature must reach exactly 73 degrees Celsius before bracket installation. Too cold and thermal expansion creates stress points. Too hot and the metal's already expanded beyond optimal mounting tolerance. Either scenario recreates the failure pattern within 3,000 miles. He connected the thermal sensor monitoring temperature with patience that transformed waiting into performance. The crowd watched numbers increment on his tablet screen, climbing through 60s into 70s with glacial progression that built attention through simple anticipation. Catherine provided running commentary, educational explanation, filling the silence. What Mr. Carter is demonstrating represents graduate-level understanding of thermal expansion coefficients and their impact on structural integrity. Most mechanics install parts at ambient temperature and hope for the best. This precision prevents premature failure and extends component longevity significantly. 71 degrees, 72, 72.5, exactly 73 degrees Celsius. Dominic began installation with movements that suggested muscle memory developed through years of practice. Torque wrench applying exact pressure in diagonal sequence that distributed stress evenly across mounting points. His hands worked with a confidence that came from understanding rather than following instructions, each action purposeful and measured. 45 minutes later, installation completed, he stepped back and wiped his hands on a clean cloth. Engine needs to cool completely before testing. Thermal shock from immediate operation could compromise the new bracket's mounting integrity. 20 minutes. The waiting transformed the showroom into theater, clients unable to leave without witnessing resolution, Diana trapped beside her own vehicle, while her humiliation accrued interest through extended exposure. Some people checked phones, others made quiet conversation, but attention remained focused on the Ferrari like gravitational pull that couldn't be escaped. 20 minutes passed with the subjective duration that anxiety creates, seconds stretching, while everyone calculated potential outcomes and their implications. Dominic climbed into the driver's seat, the Ferrari's leather interior still carrying the scent of wealth and exclusivity that had defined Blackwood Motors' brand. His work-worn hands looked incongruous against polished steering wheel, class contrast visible in the juxtaposition of manual labor meeting Italian luxury. The engine started with sound that connoisseurs recognize as perfection, mechanical symphony, devoid of the stutters and hesitations that had plagued it for 3 weeks. Dominic revved carefully, watching tachometer climb through the 3,200 RPM threshold that had previously triggered stalling. Smooth, flawless, perfect. He executed test maneuvers across the showroom floor, starts and stops, and accelerations that had previously caused failures. Each condition met with response that suggested the car had never been broken. That 3 weeks of frustration had been fever dream rather than expensive reality. The crowd erupted before he'd fully parked, applause building from scattered individuals into collective recognition, phones waving overhead to capture victory that transcended simple mechanical repair. Catherine's voice cut through the celebration, official and binding. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Catherine Pierce, Senior Technical Consultant for Ferrari North America. What I've witnessed represents the most impressive diagnostic and repair methodology I've encountered in 28 years of automotive engineering. Mr. Carter identified a failure mode that 5 certified mechanics completely missed, using techniques that combine acoustic analysis with thermal mapping in ways that exceed current industry standards. She paused, letting professional weight settle before continuing. I am personally recommending Sir Carter for the research assistant position in UCLA's automotive engineering program with full tuition benefits and annual fellowship stipend of $52,000. His methodologies deserve academic documentation and widespread implementation. Applause intensified strangers celebrating someone else's triumph with the enthusiasm that comes from witnessing injustice corrected in real time. Evelyn Hartford stepped forward, voice carrying the aristocratic authority that money couldn't buy, but breeding could provide. Diana, you made a promise, Saturday, on video, in front of 40 witnesses. You stated, and I quote directly, "The Ferrari is yours if you can fix it." Those weren't suggestions or entertainment. Those were words that carry legal and moral weight. Diana's face had progressed through white to gray, all color draining as consequences crystallized around her. That was theater. No reasonable person would interpret, "I'm a reasonable person. So is Dr. Pierce." Wrong. So are the 38 people recording you right now. So are the 1.8 million people who've watched the original video. The silence achieved depth that suggested everyone present understood they were witnessing something larger than commercial transaction, something that would define Blackwood Motors' future or confirm its absence. Evelyn delivered the final blow with precision that suggested she'd been calculating this moment since Saturday. You have two choices, Diana. First, honor your word, give Dominic the Ferrari, maintain whatever credibility you have left. Second, break your promise on camera, and I cancel my $2.1 million order. Today, right now, and I personally ensure that every luxury car buyer from Los Angeles to San Francisco understands exactly why. Diana walked toward Dominic with movements that suggested each step required conscious override of instinct to flee. She reached into her pocket, extracting Ferrari keys with hands that trembled, despite visible efforts at control. Her voice barely exceeded whisper, but microphones positioned throughout the showroom for presentation purposes caught every syllable. The car is yours. The explosion of celebration drowned whatever else she might have said, clients applauding and congratulating, while phones captured the moment. Wealth transferred from someone who'd inherited it to someone who'd earned it through competence Diana had refused to acknowledge. Dominic accepted the keys with calm that contrasted sharply with the chaos surrounding him. He looked at Diana not with triumph, but with something closer to pity, recognizing that her loss extended far beyond one vehicle. "Thank you, Mrs. Blackwood. I hope someday you find what you're looking for." Diana's composure shattered completely, voice rising with anger that couldn't find productive outlet. Don't you dare thank me. This doesn't change who you are, where you came from, what you—" Dominic interrupted with quiet authority that silenced her more effectively than shouting could have achieved. "It doesn't need to change who I am. I've always known who I am. Today, everyone else finally saw it." He walked to the Ferrari, started the engine one final time, and drove out through the main entrance, not the service entrance he'd been directed to use for 6 months, but the front doors that clients used, the symbolic exit, making visible what had been invisible throughout his employment. The sound of the Ferrari disappearing into Beverly Hills traffic felt like punctuation on a sentence that had required months to complete. Thursday evening brought news cycles that transformed local drama into national conversation video footage, spreading across platforms with velocity that suggested it had tapped into something larger than individual injustice. 3.2 million views. By sunset, trending tags multiplying as civil rights organizations and employment attorneys recognized the case's potential implications. Diana's phone rang constantly, clients canceling orders, partners requesting emergency meetings, attorneys offering services she couldn't afford. Evelyn Hartford made good on her threat immediately, formal cancellation of the $2.1 million order, delivered via email with CC to every luxury car dealer in Southern California. By Friday morning, 4 additional major clients had withdrawn their business, citing concerns about corporate culture and ethical standards that their associations couldn't accommodate. Blackwood Motors' revenue collapsed 65% in 72 hours. Evelyn called Dominic Friday afternoon, her offer delivered with the straightforward efficiency that characterized everything she did. "Diagnostic consultant for my collection, 12 vehicles, exotic and vintage. $75 per hour minimum, 80 hours monthly guaranteed. $6,000 baseline income regardless of actual hours worked." Dominic's throat tightened. $6,000 monthly, representing more than he'd earned in any previous year of his life. "Mrs. Hartford, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll also accept Catherine's position at UCLA. She's already confirmed it. Part-time research assistant, 52,000 annual pay, stipend, full tuition coverage. Combined income of $104,000 annually. You can provide for Zoe, finish your engineering degree, and formalize the methodologies you've spent 20 years developing. For the first time since Lisa's death, Dominic felt something that resembled security foundations solid enough to build on rather than sand that shifted with every economic fluctuation. Yes, to both. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Wait until you see how much work 12 exotic cars generate. I'll expect excellence, Dominic. The same excellence you demonstrated yesterday. You'll have it. The months that followed compressed into montage of systematic dismantling, Diana Blackwood's empire crumbling, with the inexorable progression of consequences meeting actions. Month 17, former employees filed joint EEOC complaint, federal investigation opening to the bureaucratic inevitability that came when documentation proved patterns rather than isolated incidents. Month 2, Ferrari North America suspended Blackwood Motors franchise agreement, pending investigation outcomes, inventory, recalled dealership credentials revoked. Month 3, Robert Blackwood's divorce finalized settlement, giving him controlling interest in company assets. He immediately initiated sale to ownership consortium that included Evelyn Hartford as primary investor. Month 4, Blackwood Motors sold for $1.8 million fraction of its previous $4.2 million valuation. Diana received minimal settlement after legal fees consumed most proceeds. Month 5, new ownership implemented reforms that transformed company culture with the efficiency that external management could achieve when prior leadership no longer possessed veto power. Blind hiring processes, mandatory anti-bias training, anonymous reporting systems. Reparations totaling $840,000 distributed among 7 terminated employees. Month 6, Dominic's diagnostic methodology published in the Journal of Automotive Engineering, peer-reviewed paper generating academic conversation about recognizing talent beyond traditional credentialing systems. Month 7, California Assembly Bill 2847 passed with bipartisan support legislation requiring auto dealerships to document hiring criteria, preventing cultural fit as sole termination justification, mandating diversity reporting. The bill carried informal designation among sponsors. The Carter Act named for the mechanic whose documentation had exposed systematic discrimination that legislators recognized extended far beyond one dealership. Time transformed victory into legacy through patient accumulation of small changes that became institutional inevitability. 18 months felt simultaneously endless in daily experience, yet instantaneous in retrospect, each day blending into the next, while fundamental structures shifted beneath the surface. 18 months after keys had been thrown at his feet, Dominic stood before a warehouse in Inglewood that renovation had transformed into something approaching his grandmother's memory of what education should provide. The Eleanor Carter Memorial Training Center occupied 15,000 square feet, converted industrial space now housing diagnostic equipment, training bays, classroom facilities, and administrative offices that would serve students who'd been told their potential didn't match their credentials. Bronze plaque mounted near the entrance displayed Eleanor's photograph from 1990, her face weathered by decades of work that society valued poorly, but that had built foundation for everything following. Eleanor Ellie Carter from 1939 to 2001. Machines don't lie, baby. People do. But if you listen close enough, you'll always hear the truth. Dominic's speech to the first graduating class, 40 students ranging from 16 to 55, representing demographics that traditional automotive education had systematically excluded, carried weight that transcended simple commencement addresses. My grandmother, Eleanor Carter, cleaned office buildings for 40 years. Minimum wage, no benefits, hands destroyed by chemicals, and knees ruined by scrubbing floors. She died in a hospital room she couldn't afford, holding my hand, telling me that someday the world would recognize what I was worth. His voice steadied grief transformed into purpose through years of patient accumulation. This center exists to prove what she knew. Talent doesn't care about credentials. Excellence doesn't care about skin color. And the truth about what people are capable of, once it's spoken loudly enough, demonstrated clearly enough, becomes impossible to ignore. Some of you were rejected from every shop in your city. Some were told you're too old, too young, wrong gender, wrong neighborhood, wrong background. Some were promised that formal education represents the only path to success. He paused, letting the familiar narratives settle before dismantling them. I'm here to tell you that's incomplete at best, deliberately false at worst. Degrees matter. Training matters. Certification matters. But they're not the only things that matter. Your hands matter. Your ears matter. Your persistence when everyone else quit, that matters most of all. The 40 students represented futures that traditional systems would have foreclosed, potential that would have died in service jobs because gatekeepers confused credentials with capability. Isaiah Brooks stood among them, 20 years old now, having progressed from Dominic's first apprentice to assistant director of training in 18 months that proved methodology could be taught when teacher understood both subject and students. The former Blackwood Motors employees, Maria Jerome and 5 others, worked as instructors. Now their experiences with discrimination transformed into lessons that protected the next generation from repeating their traumas. Equipment donated by Ferrari North America lined the training bays. Evelyn Hartford's financial contributions, having purchased tools that students couldn't have afforded independently. 127 students had graduated in the center's first 18 months. 80 more were currently enrolled. Waiting list exceeded 200 applications, demand outstripping capacity in ways that suggested the model would need to expand or replicate to serve everyone seeking alternatives to traditional automotive education. Saturday morning in late spring, nearly 2 years after keys had hit marble floors, brought Dominic to elementary school gymnasium, decorated with the enthusiastic chaos that characterized science fair student projects competing for attention through color and ambition in equal measure. Zoe's display occupied corner position, her poster board complete with the thoroughness that 2 years of growth had cultivated. She was 10 years old now. The 8-year-old who'd asked about back doors and front doors transformed into a young scientist whose confidence spoke to opportunities that had opened when her father refused to remain invisible. How my dad fixed a Ferrari that 5 experts couldn't. A study in acoustic frequency analysis and why listening matters more than looking. The project included basic engine diagrams, rendered age-appropriate thermal stress explanation, demonstrated through modified baking soda volcano that vibrated at controlled frequencies, actual photographs from Thursday's repair, and direct quotation from Dr. Catherine Pierce's journal article validating Dominic's methodology. Blue ribbon already hung from the display's corner, first place at District Science Fair validation that Zoe's work had met standards that judges applied without knowing the personal stakes involved. She ran to Dominic when she spotted him gap-toothed smile wider than seemed physically possible. Daddy, I won district champion and they said my project was groundbreaking for someone so young and demonstrated advanced understanding of mechanical engineering principles. Dominic lifted her, despite the fact that 10 years old meant she was getting heavy physics, making the gesture increasingly difficult, but emotion overriding practical concerns. You were always going to win, baby. Always. Evelyn Hartford and Dr. Catherine Pierce stood near the back of the gymnasium, their presence at elementary science fair representing the kind of support that extended beyond professional obligation into something approaching family. Nathan Grayson had come too, bringing his own daughter to see Zoe's project, the 2 girls now friends, despite the class and circumstance gaps that typically prevented such relationships from forming. Dominic set Zoe down, voice thick with pride that didn't require hiding. You're bigger than the whole sky, Zoe. Bigger than anyone who ever doubted us. And you just proved it to everyone watching. The phrase had evolved from comfort to prophecy to proven fact across months of transformation. Eleanor's wisdom transmitted through 3 generations to a child who would never know her great-grandmother, but carried her legacy nonetheless. Santa Monica Beach at sunset provided the symmetry that narratives required, same location, where Dominic and Zoe had built sandcastles the Sunday after Diana's first humiliation. The visual callback felt deliberate because it was conscious decision to return to the place where Zoe had asked questions about selling Ferraris to pay rent forever. The Ferrari 488 GTB was parked nearby now. Red paint catching golden hour light, Italian engineering that Dominic had decided to keep rather than liquidate because some victories deserve preservation beyond their monetary value. Zoe wore UCLA Engineering Kids Summer Camp t-shirt, evidence of opportunities that hadn't existed 18 months ago. Educational access that poverty would have prevented if circumstances hadn't shifted dramatically. Isaiah and 2 other students from the training center helped build elaborate sand sculpture, multi-generational collaboration that suggested community rather than isolation, collective rather than individual. Daddy, can I ask you something? Zoe's voice carried the seriousness that preceded questions she'd been considering for extended periods. Always, baby. Why did you give Mrs. Blackwood money for the scholarship fund? After everything she did to you, the question revealed knowledge that Dominic hadn't explicitly shared, information she'd gleaned through attention to adult conversations and connections children made when they thought no one was monitoring their comprehension. Because people can change Zoe. Not always, not quickly, not without pout or consequence, but sometimes. Mrs. Blackwood made terrible mistakes. She hurt people, she hurt me, she hurt families, but she's trying to fix what she broke. He paused, choosing words carefully. The scholarship fund she donated $50,000 anonymously, not for publicity or legal advantage. Mr. Blackwood told me because he thought I deserved to know. She's paying for kids who look like you to study engineering, kids who wouldn't otherwise have the chance. Zoe processed this with 10-year-old wisdom that sometimes surpassed adult sophistication. Did you forgive her? Forgiveness is complicated, baby. I'm not angry anymore. Anger would hurt me more than it hurts her. But I also haven't forgotten. I documented what happened so it can't happen again to someone else. That's different from revenge. That's justice. The distinction mattered, teaching her that accountability didn't require cruelty, that consequences could exist without hatred, that systems could change without destroying individuals beyond redemption's possibility. Grandma Ellie would be proud of you. The statement landed with force that nearly broke him. Eleanor's legacy, speaking through granddaughter, who'd never met her values, cascading across generations despite death's attempted interruption. I hope so. Every single day, I hope so. They returned to building the sand sculpture, which revealed itself as detailed replica of the Eleanor Carter Memorial Training Center, complete with tiny sand vehicles in the parking lot and American flag planted on the roof. Camera pulled back slowly, cinematic distance transforming individuals into symbols, personal story, into broader narrative about talent that survived despite systematic attempts to suppress it. Dominic's internal narration provided the voiceover that had sustained him through 6 months of invisibility and 18 months of transformation. My grandmother used to say that machines don't lie. They tell you exactly what's wrong if you know how to listen. But here's what took me 37 years to understand: people are machines too. Complex, broken, sometimes capable of both cruelty and redemption, depending on what voices they choose to hear. Diana Blackwood wasn't born racist. She was taught it. By her father, by her class, by a system that rewarded her for keeping people like me invisible. She was a machine malfunctioning from programming that should have been updated decades ago, but instead got transmitted like hereditary disease. I could have hated her. Part of me did, but hatred is a luxury that people like me can't afford. It consumes energy we need for other things. For building, for teaching, for proving that talent doesn't care about the color of your skin or the zip code you were born in. 6 months ago, I was invisible. Today, I'm training the next generation. 40 students graduated this year, 80 next year. Kids who were told they couldn't, now learning they can. That's not revenge, that's legacy. And just like my grandmother said, machines don't lie about that either. The final images cycled through outcomes that quantified transformation beyond individual triumph. Eleanor Carter Memorial Training Center. 127 students graduated, 240 currently enrolled, 200 plus on waiting list. 7 former Blackwood Motors employees, full reparations received totaling $840,000, now working as instructors, earning $65,000, $78,000 annually. Dominic Carter, UCLA engineering faculty, 3 peer-reviewed papers published featured in Smithsonian exhibit on American innovation and self-taught expertise. Zoe Carter, full scholarship to Stanford Art Engineering, class of 2033, youngest applicant ever admitted to their early college program. Diana Blackwood, anonymous donor. Carter Scholarship Fund, $150,000, contributed over 18 months, funding 12 students annually. The Carter Act, California AB 7, protects 12,000 plus workers annually from discriminatory hiring practices, adopted as model legislation in 7 additional states. Blackwood Motors under new ownership. Revenue increased 47% in first year under reform practices. Employee retention improved to 94%, customer satisfaction ratings highest in company history. The sun touched the horizon, Pacific Ocean, swallowing light, while sand sculpture stood testament to what could be built when talent finally received recognition it had always deserved. Dominic looked at Zoe, at Isaiah, at the students who'd become family, at the Ferrari that represented more than transportation or wealth. Everything that mattered existed in this moment, in this space, in the community that had formed around the simple principle that machines don't lie, but people sometimes do, and that the difference between those truths determined whether justice arrived or remained permanently deferred. Eleanor's voice echoed across 24 years of silence since cancer had taken her, but her words lived through grandson and great-granddaughter, and students who would carry them forward into futures she'd never see, but had helped create through lessons taught in Oakland parking lots under broken cars. Zoe planted the American flag on their sand sculpture's roof, final architectural detail, completing the structure. The flag caught wind off the Pacific fabric, snapping with sound that suggested finality and beginning simultaneously, story concluded, but legacy continuing through all the lives it had touched and transformed. Fade to black.